Dogman and the Mystery Cowgirl. Dear Scary Stories NYC. I was in the Gaylord State Forest area in Wolverine, Michigan, hiking, when in the next moment I found myself being pursued by a tall, gray, dog-headed man, or perhaps an upright walking canine. I fell several times as I ran from him with my big, bulky camping backpack that made me feel like I was the man on the moon. I slid out of it and left it behind, running away as the creature stopped to examine my stuff. I was already beaten up pretty badly because of everything that had happened in the last 10 minutes, and my ordeal was only starting. That was a spoiler in case you hadn't noticed. The dogman was examining and tearing open my backpack, and that was when I first got a good look at this thing. It was a canine, but it also seemed to be some kind of anthropoid or ape at the same time. At least reminded me more of a chimpanzee than any other kind of animal I can think of. And yet, that was not an ape. It had a clearly canine cranium. It was dog-headed, but other than that, it looked like some undefinable new sort of creature. I remember thinking that it was as though a dog were trying to become a man. Racing along on a hill with the dogman maybe 15 or 20 feet behind me, I failed to watch where I was going, and I whacked my noggin on a tree branch that was even harder than my thick skull. I lost my balance and began rolling chaotically all the way down that hill to a valley somewhere deep down below. I thought I was going to end up like the Dyatlov Pass people after the avalanche, but somehow I didn't get my skull cracked open or my neck twisted or even an ankle turned. It hurt all over for weeks afterward, but nothing was seriously broken. You couldn't have told that to me as I lay there at the bottom trying to will myself to stand up, though. Whatever I hadn't pulled, I had probably pushed, and I was dizzy and in shock on top of everything. I opened my eyes and I saw the dogman advancing down the hill as though I were watching it through a fisheye lens. I knew I couldn't defend myself, and that I probably wasn't even going to be ready to sit up by the time the cryptid reached me. I would have said my prayers, but my brains were scrambled and my mind was toast. I was just sort of aware enough to know that the dogman was coming to get me, but not together enough to do anything about it. And then, just like something out of a weird movie or something, this young woman wearing a cowboy hat walked from somewhere off to the right of me into my line of vision. She got between me and the animal man, and she held out her arm as though telling him to stop. The dogman reared back like Christopher Lee seeing Peter Cushing holding a big cross out in front of him. She engaged in some sort of motions that I interpreted as ritual pantomime of one kind or another, and the wolfman whined and whimpered at her. When she stood there, it only accentuated how tall and wide the dogman was. This was not a short woman. She was thin and tall, like a runway model who wandered away from her fashion shoot in order to order the dogman around. The wolf-headed beast made pathetic noises, then dropped down to all fours, put its tail between its legs, and it marched away into the woods, looking sad and glum. I called out to this lady, and she gave me a glance, but she was already walking away when she did it. I felt an intense curiosity about her, but an even more intense longing for her. She wasn't interested in knowing me, though, and so she walked away. I tried to get up and follow her, but instead I watched spots around the corner of my vision, and I felt numbness take over. Soon, I couldn't remember why I wanted to be awake any longer, and I fell backward into deep unconsciousness. When I woke up, it was morning. That was very confusing to me. I must have slept over 10 hours there on the grass. I ached all over, partly because of the odd way I had passed out on the hard ground, and partly because of how beat up I had gotten while the dogman was chasing me and messing with me. What kind of a witch was that woman? What magical powers did she possess? The dog was as afraid of her as I was afraid of the dog. Why? I can't even tell you if she was physically there. This might have been one of those experiences where someone shows up to save you, then disappears. Maybe she was an angel in a cowboy hat. If the Dogman came all the way down that hill after me, it must not have had good intentions for me. Did she know that? Is that why she showed up to save my life? Or, what if she was real and the entire incident was just a coincidence? What if she just happened by when I was in trouble? Of course, that wouldn't explain why she wasn't afraid of the Dogman. Even more than that, it wouldn't explain why the Dogman was afraid of her. I was about to faint, so maybe I just wasn't being very observant. Maybe she held something up to the Dogman that forced it to go away. Maybe she had a weapon or something that I just wasn't seeing from my angle. I can't really tell you, but in my opinion, that Dogman was under her control, and he was in her power. At no point during this episode was she ever afraid of that Dogman in the slightest. So this was the scariest night of my life. It reminds me of that old joke. I don't want to say I was scared back there, because I was terrified. And yet, it didn't scare me off going out into the wilderness. It didn't even scare me off wanting to see that creature again. Since this happened, I've read and listened to a lot of stuff about the Dogman. Now that I have a little more of an idea of what it was that I ran into, I wish I had a second chance to see it. I know how dumb that sounds, since I nearly didn't survive my first encounter. Whenever I regret my life choices, whenever I find I'm not happy where I am in life, whenever I wish I could go back in time and get a redo, I think back on the strangest night of my life, and I wish I had another chance to revisit the Dogman and the mystery Cowgirl, the Werewolf of Wisdom Street. Dear Scary Stories NYC. In the southwest corner of Wisconsin, by Iowa and Illinois, sits a sleepy little town called Schulzburg, where one day I found myself employed. I had to deliver a treadmill, then demonstrate the use of the product. This was decades ago, so it wasn't as fancy as a modern treadmill. Even so, people would get confused, and this lady I was delivering it to that day got very confused. I was there in her house explaining things over and over until it had started to get pretty dark outside. Risking being rude, I had to insist on leaving at that point, and so I did. I was a little annoyed at how late I was going to be getting home, and how my evening's plans were going to have to be changed or postponed. I needed to get up to County Road U and head north from there. I was going to take Friendship Street past Mercy, Wisdom, and Faith up to the highway and make my connection, but I made a left onto Wisdom by accident for some unknown reason. I guess I was feeling too sorry for myself to pay attention to where I was going. I realized I was coming up to a dead end, and I pulled around to my right to see if I could cheat and make a U-turn all in one glorious leftward turn. As I did so, I saw a figure approaching from the distance in front of me. It caught my eye because it seemed out of the ordinary. You know the opening of Night of the Living Dead? That first zombie they see? He almost seems normal, but not quite. That was the vibe I got about whoever that was walking over the grass. So before I made my turn, I looked out to see who that was. Something just told me that I should. Almost as soon as I looked in that direction, and almost as soon as that figure could see me seeing him, he sprang into action, running toward me. I was trying to understand who or what that was as it ran full speed in my direction. In my mind, I felt a sense of panic that I haven't felt since I got ganged up on back in junior high school. That horrible moment when you realize that someone big enough to take you down has decided that he would, in fact, like to take you down. I knew before parsing any other information about this situation that this was a very large figure of a man, and that this was someone who, for some reason, had taken a personal disliking to me. I stared, numb, car idling, as this huge figure ran toward me on two legs. I realized in a step or two that this was not a human, because I could see by his silhouette that he did not possess human legs. It was as if he were a horse who had evolved hands and was running upright. I saw the dirt kicked up by the animal's legs, and it reminded me at that distance of video I had seen of horse races. An upright running horse was angry at me? Maybe it was rabid or insane, I thought, and then I remembered, hey, I'm the driver of a car. I might be able to use this car in order to put greater distance between me and the upright angry horse running at me. I remembered that I needed to make a left turn before doing that, so I began to make that legendary all-in-one move U-turn that I had been thinking about earlier. The car began moving forward, and I turned the wheel as far to the left as I could manage, stealing one glance over my right shoulder at the upright running monster heading toward me. Only now, the monster wasn't a horse at all. It was a werewolf. Or a dog-headed werewolf? It was a furry, upright dog, but one with clawed hands. It absolutely was the last thing I would have expected it to turn out to be. It had dark gray fur, and I think it had dark gray skin as well, or else it was entirely covered in that fur. It had white eyes, just white and glowing. Its teeth were too large for it to entirely close its mouth around them, or else maybe it was just putting them on display for my sake. Thanks, Dogman, because I wasn't scared enough. I'm trying to joke around about it to distance myself from how horrible it was to be in that moment. I mean, if I think about how scary it was, realizing I wasn't going to make that U-turn in one movement, realizing I was going to have to stop the car, then back up in the direction of that Dogman, stop the car again, shift gears, and then begin the process of getting myself away from that Dogman, I'll get another one of my stomach aches. I would never want to be hypnotized and regressed about what happened that day, because I would never want to feel that panicked and hopeless ever again. So I brought the car as far forward and to the left as I could, given the space I had. I stopped. I put the car in reverse. I turned around to see behind me, and I got ready to hit the gas when I saw it. Through the back of the car, I saw that the Dogman had closed most of the gap between us. And then, before I could look away, he leaped forward, as though he were going to do a belly flop onto the ground. Rather than hit the gas, I sat there watching that upright dog, wanting to know what the big dark canine was jumping forward for. The Dogman did not belly flop onto the ground. He was diving forward to begin running on all fours. This seemed to significantly upgrade his speed, and I finally hit that gas pedal to go in reverse. I maneuvered the car into position, watching the Dogman running toward me as I drove in reverse toward him. It was a second or two on that night that seems like forever to me in retrospect, because it went so against my instincts to be driving backward toward that thing that looked like it could eat my car for lunch. I had to do it anyway, but it made me want to throw up, seriously. Luckily, my gag reflex held up until I could complete the maneuver, switch gears, and prepare to finally drive out of this situation. And the second that I hit the gas to begin forward momentum, the Dogman caught up to me and pounced its front legs onto my trunk. We got off to a somewhat violent start, and the Dogman ran around to the driver's side of the car. At first he had no trouble keeping a bit ahead of me and doing various things to slow down my process. Like, he faked me out that he was going to jump in front of the car, which caused me to briefly slow down. Every second he slowed my progress toward maximum speed increased the likelihood that this story was going to have a very ugly ending. So there we were, this dog-headed man out there, and me inside my car, racing some weird kind of game of chicken down Wisdom Street in the early night. I had decided that if the wolf faked a dive in front of the car again, this time I'd hit the gas instead of the brake. I was just gonna pray that any crash we had would hurt him more than it hurt me. As we approached the corner at the end of the block, I had achieved a slight lead on the dog, who was now running on 2 legs. I took the left onto Friendship as fiercely and savagely as I've ever made a turn, nearly winding up on the lawn of the family that lived over there. I had hoped that the werewolf would stop following me when I got on Friendship, but I don't know why I thought that would happen. He followed me left, and we sped past Charity and then Happy, racing out of town past more houses spaced apart in the beautiful country over there. There's a little bridge on Friendship. When you get past that, you're off into the hilly countryside until you reach County Road U. Well, I gunned it up each hill, and we did airtime like it was a roller coaster ride. I'd have to use the brakes going downhill to keep from losing control. It was the wildest ride I'd ever put a car through that I owned. And all the way through it, the Dogman was right on my tail. At some point, he had switched from bipedal running to running down on all fours, which seemed to allow him to hit speeds in the 40 to 50 mile per hour range. And while he was able to maintain that speed somewhat uniformly, I was all out of control due to the hilly terrain I was unused to driving over at that speed. I just wanted to get on some level ground so I could open up the engine and put some distance between me and that creature. It was so unnerving to see it still there every time I looked behind me that I thought I was going to go crazy. It was so hot and sweaty that I wished I could take my shirt off. The sweat was running in my eyes and stinging them, making it harder for me to see and harder for me to think straight. A wave of depression overwhelmed me, and I felt like giving up. I just sort of ran out of mental gas and switched over into loser mode. I didn't know what I had done to get this animal mad at me. I just knew that it hated my guts. Fate doesn't care if you understand what kind of creature it is that ended your life. Fate only cares how the story turns out. Whatever happened to me, I knew fate would be entertained. We got to the end of East Friendship, and we both made that right onto the highway. I was going to only take the highway a short distance to connect with County Road U heading north, but under the circumstances I thought I should stick on the 4-lane highway, just because it might be busier. If this Dogman finally caught up with me, maybe someone might see my predicament and help me out in some manner. It turned out that I didn't have to wait very long for that to happen. My turn onto the highway was a little grand, shall we say. A little too fast, a little too desperate, and more than a little out of my own lane. I almost sideswiped a cop car, then almost slammed him from behind before I managed to pass him in the right lane. He put on his siren to try to get me to pull over, but I hit the gas and hoped he would figure it out. The werewolf ran alongside his police cruiser, blocking his way, and the officer realized he had a bigger problem now. As I sped away, I said a prayer internally for that officer. I have no idea what happened to him, but I know that was the end of the Dogman's pursuit of my vehicle. I hear your channel sometimes. You like to derive lessons from what happens with the Dogman. The only lesson I can take away from this experience is that life is completely random and makes no sense at all. That's the only thing I think I learned from the Werewolf of Wisdom Street. Well, holy moly, golly gee, our executive producer is Christy C. We'd like to welcome a number of new channel members one at a time over the next few episodes, and some people we're happy to see return, like Kathy B. For tonight, we're celebrating Chris C upgrading to our $10 level. That means she got to see this show last night. It means she got to see our secret Werewolf Wednesday show that you guys aren't going to get to see for probably another month or two. And of course, Chris C has access to our 21 hours of archived, secret, uncensored Dogman stories, with a new one each Sunday. Here's our official spokesdog, Henry Lee Dogman, to fill in any details I may have left out. Hank? Thanks for watching till the end. If you liked what you saw, please consider clicking like on the video or sharing it with your friends and family that you think might also be interested. If you would like to see more of our work, please consider subscribing and hitting that bell icon next to the subscribe button so that YouTube will alert you when we put out a new video. To become a channel member and gain access to our special perks, you can click that join link under each of our videos. Another option is to join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. You can join for as little as 99 cents on YouTube or $1.50 at peterbernard.com, and that gains you access to our weekly secret uncensored episodes. If you'd like to see our 21 hours of archives of uncensored Dogman stories, then please join at the $3 level or above. To get to watch our shows in advance of the public, please join at our $10 level. That gets you all the perks. If you join our channel memberships, you need to check our community page here on YouTube in order to get the links to the secret videos and other perks. If you're in the PayPal subscribers club, Peter will email you all the news and links himself. Once joining the PayPal club, which is Peter's homemade club, please give him a chance to see that you've joined and to compose you a personal welcome email, as none of that is automated. But whichever you join, we'll name you an executive producer for the next available episode. Do you have a scary experience that you'd like to share with us? You can email us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or call our Scary Stories voicemail hotline at 804-LA-SCARY. That's 804-537-2279. It's a Google voicemail box, so that means it keeps cutting off after every 3 minutes. If your story is longer than that, please keep calling back and we can piece it together on our end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.